48 Part 1 will stand part. We come to Part 2, which is just Clause 34. And the question is that Part 2 stand part. Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. The transitional provisions in this particular bill relate mostly, in fact entirely now, because one clause has been deleted, to the question of the definition of the contact person, which is a matter that I was discussing in my earlier call. Had I had another call in Part 1, I certainly would have got up and expressed my concern that the National Government have not taken up the compromise position of a 2-year period for the repayment holiday. This was a pragmatic solution proposed by this side of the House, and very unfortunate that it has not been taken up by the Government. It certainly runs in the face of the good old-fashioned Kiwi OE, and I'm very disappointed that the House has not seen fit to support New Zealanders in the rite of passage that they've had for many years to take that OE for a couple of years, and that's what that amendment would have done. But the transitional provisions are specifically relate to the question of the definition of a contact person, and the reason there needs to be a transitional provision is because the definition is changing, and those people who already are, I guess, contact people won't necessarily know. So the particular clause in question here is the definition that is now in section 193A5, which, if we go to that for people reading along at home, that's on page 22 of the bill. And basically what that's saying is that in this section, in relation to a borrower, it means an individual whose name has been notified under section 16A in relation to the borrower, or an individual nominated by the borrower under section 107A and 193B. And the big difference here, as we've discussed earlier in this bill, is that the person who has previously been listed as a contact person for a borrower is now going to be more likely to be contacted than they ever were before. So previously, when people have given contact details, it's really been a fairly perfunctory exercise. It's one where simply contact details are given, and if someone is in default, they would be contacted. Now, the provision, and why there's an important transitional clause on this, is that that's changing. It's a transition. And so it's important that that contact people who have been identified by borrowers will now know that they have an additional responsibility, and that's covered in clause 193B, which is referred to via clause 193A5 in the transitional provisions, so that 193A5 actually lists off some of the responsibilities. 193B lists off some of the responsibilities of a contact person. And it's worth noting that in 193B2, if there is a change in any of the details of a borrower's contact person, the borrower must promptly notify the Commissioner of the changed details. Now, that is actually not only something that now impinges on the contact person, but actually on the borrower themselves. Will they know necessarily when they're overseas that the person they've listed as a contact person is moved? And perhaps that's why this clause ends up being referred to as part of the transitional provisions, because it is to give time for people to get used to this new role that is both put on the person who's the contact person and the person who's the borrower. So these are actually substantive changes, and I guess at one level it's good then that there is a grace period through to the end of the year put in place by the transitional provisions. But on the other hand, as I raised in my earlier call, I actually think these changes are significant enough that it will come as a surprise to some people, as I was discussing earlier on, parents who have become the contact person by default, virtually, for their children, now actually have a set of responsibilities, and if they move, they certainly better let their children know, because that's actually the responsibility that now falls upon the borrower. So the transitional provision is one that clearly is necessary in order to put in place the changes, but I guess on this side of the House we raise some question about those changes, because just being a contact person has been a very low-level activity. Now it's a much higher-level activity, and we do have to remember that the student loan is a loan contract between the borrower and the Crown, and these contact people are actually have no responsibility for the loan itself. So they're getting quite an additional role. They're going to be contacted by Inland Revenue. They're going to be contacted by the state. Their name, their details. Okay, Mr. Chair. Their name, their details are going to be kept by the state and obviously updated on a regular basis if the borrower is fulfilling 193B that's been included here in the bill. So it is actually quite a substantive change, and I know Mr. Dunn acknowledged that when he was in the chair earlier on, but I do think, you know, if this bill passes in its current form, it is going to be something that will be different. So I'm not going to take much more of a call, Mr. Chair, other than to note that the transitional provisions are not just the normal dates and things. It actually relates to a substantive change around what it is to be a contact person for a student loan borrower. It is a now much bigger job, one where you will be contacted more often, and I do think that is going to come as quite a surprise, particularly some of the parents of New Zealand, and I hope they're huddled over their radios tonight to know what the change will be.
Honourable